Playing the Past: History and Nostalgia in Video Games is a collection of articles edited by Zach Whalen and Lori N. Taylor. This collection draws on the expertise of several authors to explore three major topics: playing in the past, playing and the past, and playing with the past. Although each author focuses on their own niche area of interest, there is a common thread throughout the book, an observation of the unique values and limitations between creating immersive, educational, historical games while respecting societal values and collective senses of nostalgia. In the book's introduction, Whalen and Taylor make an interesting observation about the popular game Call of Duty, writing, quote, "I've never played a game that captures the feel of Hollywood's version of World War II like Call of Duty," unquote. This footage from Call of Duty does have that effect, but caused me to ask why. And if that is the case for historical games like this one, are immersive games worth investing our time and money into when films on the topic already exist? The authors go on to write that, quote, "Games can use history for the purpose of politics, education, historical revision, or entertainment, but in all of these instances, a sense of nostalgia establishes the relationship between the real present and a virtual past," unquote. In a game like Call of Duty World War II, which focuses on what is widely agreed on as a very dark point in history, it can be difficult to imagine why and how a game could successfully create a sense of nostalgia for players who may or may not have prior experiences with the topic at hand. It is not until much later in the book that this topic is revisited in James Campbell's article titled "Just Less Than Total War: Simulating World War II as Ludic Nostalgia." Although Campbell's article does not explicitly comment on the earlier writing by Whalen and Taylor, when their observations are viewed together, it becomes clear that in order to build a digital world that users are captivated enough to interact with, while seeming realistic enough to learn from, it is the details that are missing that make all the difference. In one example, Campbell writes, quote, "In first-person shooters, weapons do not jam. Players do not become hopelessly lost, and friendly troops do not mistake the player for the enemy. Things work, and death is a product of having done something incorrectly or inefficiently. It is not, with very few exceptions, a product of bad luck." This is what he calls a form of remediated nostalgia, in which historical games attempt to improve on the cultural nostalgia that is formed by historical films. Campbell's argument is not limited because the game that it is based on is intended for entertainment rather than education. Instead, his observations can be applied to the creation of educational games. The idea of incorporating real-life chance into games seems to make simulating many scenarios realistically more of a possibility. Unfortunately, Campbell fails to further explore how this might play out, if it is possible, and whether players would be continually interested in a game that is equally as frustrating and unpredictable as real life. Although Campbell does not explore this idea, Tracy Fullerton's article Documentary Games: Putting the Player in the Path of History provides a game matrix based on her own research with games that measures the effectiveness of how realistically the scenario is represented and how specific the scenario is. While this matrix could be seen as a helpful tool in creating educational games, Fullerton also observes that the games that come closest to being realistic and specific in their presentation are also the most controversial. Although Fullerton does not explicitly say so, this can all be drawn back to the idea of nostalgia and the fact that both historians and game developers will rarely have the opportunity to create a brand new connection between players and history, but only write over and edit existing ones. When games such as JFK Reloaded use game mechanics to realistically represent the assassination of the US president, they fail to acknowledge that within the public's collective sense of nostalgia, there is no room for a sanitized version of the story. This is not because the representation is too close to reality, but that the sense of emotion associated with the event is so strong that a representation void of emotion is offensive to many members of the public. This book ultimately serves as a starting point for historical game developers. While each of these authors appears to have come to their own conclusions about their chosen topic, they seem to create more questions for a game developer or educator when it comes to applying these ideas in real life. It is my observation that if the authors and editors of this book seem to be more aware of the other texts they are packaged with, they might have been able to collaborate towards finding more solutions for the issues that they repeatedly point out in different ways.